Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Everybody is to exit by the door which you entered the room, or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If anybody needs assistance in leaving the room, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website, so can I please ask that everybody turns off your mobile phone or places it on silent for the duration of the meeting. Moving on to item number 2, we have apologies.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor A. Sargent, and Councillor Jane Sargent is substituting.
I also know that Councillor Golby has made an apology and can't attend tonight. If anybody has any questions, Councillor Wilson will try his best to answer, but if he cannot answer, Councillor Golby has offered to put an answer in writing to anybody that needs one. Moving on to item number 3, the minutes from the previous meeting. Does anybody have any issues with the minutes? Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. Just looking at item E43 on page 7. Normally we have the work programme attached to the agenda. I just wondered where the work programme is and whether this item has actually made it onto the work programme. I can't find the work programme anywhere.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We are still in the process of compiling the work programmes for the various overview and scrutiny panels, obviously with the separation of panels. We did have a meeting with the chairs last week in order to have a discussion about where we were going to allocate those particular items. That particular item is on the work programme that was considered, and it will be coming forward to the appropriate panel once we've agreed it with the chairs. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody got anything else they wish to add? Is everybody in agreement that the minutes are as true and accurate reflective of a previous meeting? I move the minutes. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Cooper seconds. Is there any dissent? We'll take that as agreed then. Moving on to item number 4. Does anybody have any declarations of interest that are not noted? Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. My declarations of interest are incorrect on page 12. I have had a conversation with Victoria about that, so they do need to be corrected. Surprisingly, I'm not a member of the Conservative Party, being a Labour member. Thanks, Chair.
Anybody else with any other interests? Councillor Sargent.
Sorry, I didn't see on at the beginning, Chair. So it's already been done. It should have been taken off that I'm no longer the Board of Directors on Volunteer Friends in Borkington. That was agreed to be taken off a couple of meetings ago. Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, the public consultation. I believe that we have 2 public speakers, Councillor Condacor and Mrs Condacor. Yeah, that's okay. Moving on to item number 6, questions to the Cabinet. Does any member have a question they wish to put to one of the Cabinet members in attendance tonight? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I did have one for Councillor Galby. I've got a feeling, Councillor Wilson, you most probably won't be able to answer, but I'm happy if you want to relay it back to her. And I've got one for Councillor Gutteridge. I believe I can ask a question of anything in your portfolio holes. I wasn't sure whether it was just on this OSP document, but that's what I'm told. It's in regard to the development at Ravellow Drive, the house and development that was started has stopped for some time and has only just recommenced. And the question I'm asking is, when will the lights be put along the pathway that was agreed at planning? Because it's not been done. The path has been moved. It's now in the dark. And I think it's, we're going to have issues there. But I understand if you can't answer that question.
Councillor Wilson, are you happy to answer that?
I don't have the specifics because obviously it's not my portfolio. I'll try and answer the points that I can. I do know that there has been an issue with the modular housing contract, which has led to a delay in that. I believe there was an issue that we've had to find a new developer to help with the modular housing, which will inevitably have led to a delay in a number of the planning conditions being met. But I am sure officers and Councillor Galby can provide you with a more detailed answer in regard to that particular planning condition. I think they probably would need to speak to the developers to see exactly how far along they are and what their time estimates are. But I have no issue with following that up with a written answer from Councillor Galby, and I'll speak to her about that for you.
Remember whether I turned it off or on then. And my other question is for Councillor Gutteridge. In terms of Glendale, there does seem to be a few issues with Glendale at the moment in terms of grass cutting. I've had lots of complaints from Lexington Court and Dillon Court in terms of their length of their grass that was the mowers were sent in to mow it and couldn't mow it because it is that long. They've told the residents they've got no machinery, and the machinery they haven't got spares for, so I was a little concerned at that. But it seems to be all over my patch in Abbey, where they've either not cut the grass or cut the grass and left all the long grass along the back lines. Looks a bit like a British rail sandwich, with the long bits at the back and all the nice smooth bits in the middle, but it I just can't understand why the job hasn't been done all at the same time. They're not coming back to do it because I've had one that I've been keeping my eye on for over a week, so they haven't been back to do it. It's not as if, doing it one day and coming back the next, so I've got real concerns over that. The other issue is it seems to be along railings. It's picked up if you go along past the craft centre, the railings that go up along there, it's all up high around there. And the other issue that I've since picked up is around the front of the town hall, which I've always been quite proud of how it looks. But at the moment, there's 4-foot weeds in there and brambles going across the pathway. So I'm just wondering if you can give me an update as to what seems to be the current issue with Glendale in terms of their workload. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, I'm not happy with Glendale. Basically, it's been that we started off in March, very good. We had then had the wettest May, and we couldn't cut grass. Also, the bedding plants were a fortnight late because they didn't grow quick enough in the contractor's nursery. Then we started to cut the grass in June, and as you know, with your lawns, the lawns are growing rapid and the grass has grown rapid, and it got away from them. Going back to your particular problem with Dillon Court, I did have people on to me, and they have been and cut the grass at Dillon Court about a week ago, because I went afterwards and had a look. Strimming, basically Glendale are working in bubbles because they've got a workers team because of the COVID-19. They have a team out mowing, teams out bedding out, and teams out strimming. And I fully agree with you, the strimming isn't up to scratch. And I have told them, and we will look to do various things with Glendale in the next week or two. But if you'd like to email me with your specific points, I will take it up. But you can always put your complaints onto customer.services@nuneatonandbedworth.gov.uk. Log on to that. They will come back to you. You'll get an email back with a case number, and then they should come back to you in 10 working days and tell you what they've done. If they don't come back then, email them again, because they have got quite a lot of complaints, because we are behind due to the adverse weather early on. I hope that answers your question.
Would you like to come back to something?
Oh, sorry, it's me.
There we go. I am aware of how I deal with complaints, etc. But I thought, as you would hear, and I'm sure you're happy to answer me questions. But, in terms of the front of the town hall, that really does need looking at with a bit of haste.
Thank you. I will carry on about the town hall. We're busy at the moment trying to catch up mowing, trying to bed out all the parks. Hopefully by the end of next week, all the bedding plants will be done. Then they can move the teams that are doing the bedding plants onto the borders, which I fully agree. Some of the weeds are very long, but it's due to the adverse weather conditions we've had. But please do make full use of the customer service line, because it gives us then a history of where we've had problems, so that when we sit down later in the year, we can say to the contractor, look, this is what we've had, that's what we've had. Why have you had to rectify this? Why have you not got to rectify this? One of my pet hates is the strimming. You come into the town and they've made a lovely job of planting the flowers, cutting the grass, but they've not strimmed. And they know fully about the strimming. Also, they went round early and put weed killer on to subdue the weeds. Some of it took and some of it didn't, and they have started again to put out the weed killer, and they will start to do the jitties for the county council as well.
Councillor Wilson, I believe you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to add on to what Councillor Gutteridge has said, as leader of the council, I can assure Councillor Shepherd I am not happy with the current performance of Glendale. It is that we have inherited the current contract as it is written, but they are not abiding to the terms of the contract as it is currently written. So as leader of the council, I have demanded an emergency meeting with Glendale between myself, officers, Councillor Gutteridge as the portfolio holder, to actually bring them in and ask them what they intend to do and what their recovery plan is for Nuneaton and Bedworth. Because although under the new contract they are not being paid for services that they aren't doing, whereas under the old contract they were paid regardless of whether work was done. Whilst we are making technically some savings in the finance budget, I'd much rather spend the money that was due to be paid on actually getting the services that we want delivered. So they are coming in next Wednesday to see me, I believe, about that. And they are also coming on site to meet the team down at the depot about that. And also I have asked officers to look at default notices in terms of the contract, because I believe that we need to issue a few warning shots across their bow that this performance isn't good enough. As residents in Nuneaton and Bedworth, and this administration as well, expects better. And I believe officers are in the process of issuing some notices on that very issue. And in addition, I am aware that there are some issues with the streamers themselves. So they have tried to be environmentally friendly with these battery-powered streamers, but they have proven to be a very energy intensive. So once they have started and used them for about an hour, the battery then cuts out, and then they then have to get another battery, put the other one on charge, etc. So there is an issue with the actual equipment. They've quite rightly tried to do something on the environmental climate change front, but it's also had some unintended consequences. So these are all issues which myself and Councillor Guttridge are taking extremely seriously because they impact on everyone in the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody else have a question for the Cabinet members? In that case, then we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is the Air Quality Action Plan. And Andrew Snowden will give us a presentation.
Evening. I'll just start with just an apology for sending out the data with the errors in initially. Because I was aware that you'd probably want some time to view it, I'd sent it and then had a good check through it and realised when I tallied it against our results, they weren't correct. So as I say, we've taken that up with the consultants and I've recirculated our own data that we hold, which is correct. Just to say, the action plan that we're here to look at is based on the correct data. So it's the annual status reports that we're correcting. But it was a draft annual status report, so that was being finalised anyway. What I intended to do really was, because we've got new members, and I'm not quite sure how much knowledge of local air quality management there is in the room, I'd provide, main thing would be a brief overview really of the local air quality arrangements here at Nuneaton and Bedworth. So, and then just move on to just talk about the Air Quality Action Plan proposal. So yeah, air quality, it's become much more prominent, I think, in the public sphere in sort of recent years because of its links with various health conditions, but particularly lung and heart and cardiovascular conditions and exacerbation of existing conditions that people have in that regard. That was always known, and I say it's become more prominent, but right back from the Environment Act 95, that's where our duties under local air quality management come from. So local authorities, including Nuneaton and Bedworth, have a duty to review and assess air quality within their area. And if they identify or anticipate there being a problem, they need to declare an air quality management area and put in place an action plan to address that. That can be for various pollutants, but in reality, almost the overwhelming majority of air quality management areas in the country have been declared in relation to nitrogen dioxide. There's very few others. So typically for local authorities, nitrogen dioxide is the thing that they'll be working on predominantly. So to measure that, we have a network of small diffusion tubes that are placed around the borough to measure, and we put them out for a month, and they measure the nitrogen dioxide concentrations in that location. We found, going back to sort of 2009, 2010, we did find exceedances of the nitrogen dioxide air quality objective. First of all, in the Leicester Road gyratory area, and subsequently on the Midland Road, Corporation Street, Central Avenue area. So both of those areas were declared as air quality management areas, and the areas covered by that are shown in figures 3 and 5 of the proposed action plan. Our pre-existing air quality action plan was derived in 2011 to address those two air quality management areas and the issues there. So that's in need of review. We're under a duty to review that action plan fairly regularly, so that's what we're doing with this proposed plan. And that's been done with us in conjunction with our consultants, AQC, air quality consultants, who've produced the plan with us. The first thing to say around that is the first recommendation in relation to what we call Air Quality Management Area 1, which is the Leicester Road gyratory, is to revoke that. That's been comfortably below the objective for a number of years, and DEFRA have previously been supportive of that, but it was left in existence really, just to look at, because of the housing developments from HSG1 and the impact that that might have. But so far we're not seeing the increase, and that's still comfortably below. So the recommendation is to revoke that AQMA, Air Quality Management Area, and to focus mainly on the Midland Road area and any sort of borough-wide measures that we want to take. So within Midland Road and the Central Avenue area, we've got several NOx tubes there, nitrogen dioxide diffusion tubes, we commonly call them NOx tubes. But of those tubes, 2 of them are showing exceedances on the length of Midland Road between the Manor Court Road junction and then before it turns into Tuttle Hill. And they're shown on the plan. So Figure 6 shows the data around that. So as I say, the air quality management, the air quality action plan is mainly focused on that area. As part of the plan, the consultants undertook source apportionment, and they looked at the required reduction in emissions and the timescales over which those 2 areas might come to compliance, purely based on the nature of the fleet in that location, which they obtained from Warwickshire County Council. So that's things like how many HGVs, how many buses, how many private cars, that kind of thing. And the national trend data, which shows an improving picture with improvements in engine technology, the better quality Euro 6 diesel engines, obviously increasing electric as we go forwards. So by national trend data and based on the fleet source apportionment that they've done, they would have expected compliance in 2021. 2 caveats to that. That was ignoring the COVID pandemic. So whilst the data looks good for 2021 this year, we're not, obviously we're not putting any weight, giving any weight to that because things are not normal. So we're almost ignoring the data. We're not ignoring it, but we're not giving any weight to the data that's happened during the pandemic in terms of making decisions. The second thing to say is that the national trend data isn't being replicated at Midland Road in that area. So the reductions that typically we're seeing across the country aren't happening there. So we wouldn't anticipate the objective to be achieved within the timescale set out. But at the same time, we don't expect it to be that far down the line that we do achieve it. Now, there's speculation around reasons for that, whether it's the slightly slower adoption of newer vehicles in the area, and that will take longer to feed through, and cleaner engines will come on stream there a little bit slower than elsewhere, but we don't actually know that. But all we do know is that the exceedances remain, and we're targeting our action plan towards that. The nature of the action plan is that it's proportionate to the timescales that we're looking at and to the level of the exceedances. So we think it's the best way to target our resource at trying to bring the air quality under control or into compliance in that location. The action plan is fairly broad because what you don't want to do is to set very, very specific measures that you're going to do, because the action plan isn't something that is reviewed and renewed every year. It's at least 5 years before we would do it again. So if we had very specific measures, the action plan would be out of date quite quickly. So they're reasonably broad. And then we produce an annual status report, an ASR, which gives an update every year on those specific measures that have happened or that we've done. The measures that we're taking are because the report's been circulating, there's quite a lot of information in there. I won't go into them all, but just to summarise the brief headings, really, of the different areas that we can look to work in. So, Category 1, and these are derived from the DEFRA categories that the measures should fall into. So, Measure 1, as a broad category, is to support and collaborate with Warwickshire County Council on traffic management measures impacting Midland Road. A big part of that is the Transforming Nuneaton programme. So because there's measures planned around the ring road and various traffic measures in the town, we're going to, and already have started to work closely with the highways team who are working on that to achieve the best outcome from air quality and make sure air quality is on the agenda in what they're proposing. The second category is to promote behaviour change away from single occupancy and private use, so working closely with the representatives from Warwickshire on the cycling schemes and that kind of thing. The third is to promote the use of alternatively fueled vehicles, so everyone will be aware of the drive towards electric and the cut-off in this country at 2030 for electric vehicles and the infrastructure that is needed in place for that. The electric bus town in Coventry that will have impacts in Nuneaton as well. The fourth category is to develop policies to support better air quality. So an example of that might be policies relating to planning. So we already have a supplementary planning document related to air quality and the development of that and the use of that. And then section 5, which is something particularly I think that is not, it will have a benefit at Midland Road and surrounds, but it is also quite a borough-wide thing, and that's to control domestic emissions, because something that's become much more apparent in fairly recently really is around domestic solid fuel burning. So the government are bringing in regulations, as you probably know, around ready-to-burn wood and banning of house coal. And it's how we interact with that in terms of enforcement, because some of that would sit with the Environmental Protection team, but also around how that links to the air quality planning documents around low NOx boilers and this kind of thing. So they're the broad topics. At this point, I'd perhaps hand over to the panel and perhaps address other issues by way of discussion and questions. And I don't propose it to go into a lot of details because there is a lot of detail in there, which would take a long time to go through. So I think it's probably better just to hand back to the committee.
I believe at this stage, Councillor Kondaki would like to come in.
Well, that one works. Good. This is for me and Michelle. Assuming a switch to electric cars, it's going to be a big mistake because we're so late in adopting electric cars here. We're not a rich town. And actually just having electric cars actually doesn't reduce the congestion. And it's actually the heavier vehicles, the lorries and the buses and the taxis, the old taxis, that get stuck in the congestion. So the electric car doesn't make the queue shorter. And the car it replaces wasn't actually the big emitter. It was that lorry or that bus or whatever. So we have a massive problem. And cycling in today, a lot of the vehicles past me were SUVs, larger and larger cars. So actually, the car fleet is not getting greener in Nuneaton at the moment. It's getting larger, heavier, and also older. I mean, one of the problems is we have greener cars in Birmingham and Coventry because they ban the most polluting cars entering the centre of Birmingham and Coventry. Those cars will get sold on and be in Abbey Green or Leicester Road. We have a massive problem about council policy. Free parking and all these things we're doing is encouraging more people to drive in, and we aren't considering air quality. And we are not doing enough to collaborate. I mean, Michelle chairs the Cycle Forum. They're not involved with environmental health about all this stuff. We're trying desperately to get a cycle route across Abbey Green. As part of the Transforming Nuneaton going on, you need that cycle route across Abbey Green so people can safely come in from the west. So these are really important things to develop to actually reduce the amount of traffic, because we can't police people to stop driving across Abbey Green unless they've got a good alternative. And today's a lovely day, but there's no safe way of cycling in from the Camp Hill direction. So a lot of these things need to work together. We've got appalling measurements. I've got a machine here that measures particles, PM2.5s. We don't have any in the borough. And particle pollution is one of the big killers. Half of it is NO2, half of it's particulates. And the EU safety levels and the UK safety levels are 2.5 times the World Health Authority. And there's a big campaign to bring the legal limits down to 10 micrograms, and that would really mean that virtually every major road would have a problem in the borough. So, and these laws are changing. The pressure is to have really tough levels. And you look at these spreadsheets we've got, we don't mention Bedworth, we don't mention Attleborough, we don't mention Heath End Road in these reports because we're just measuring it against this limit of 40. We're losing about 50 or 60 lives early in the borough due to air quality, even in places where the air quality is 30 or something. 40 is no magic thing. You don't get to 39 and you have no health impacts. People, particularly with all the other health conditions, obesity, asthma, we've got such a poor health in the population, particularly in Abbey Green. Yeah, they are badly affected by air pollution at 30, and we're expecting them to put up with illegal levels. So we really do need a change, and we need better monitoring and a better idea of doing something about this, not just looking at 40 as a limit. Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Shepherd.
You moved into debate rather quickly there and caught me out. In terms of the document, I would have real concern about taking out the Leicester Road at the moment. I think, you know, the data refers to 2019, pandemic. So, you know, we weren't getting the traffic through that area as we would normally get it. So I think, you know, I think we shouldn't be just saying, well, we'll take it out now. So I think I've got concerns over that. In terms of the collaboration with Warwickshire County Council on traffic measures, you know, I was delighted to see they were going to do something in Midland Road, and then it all stopped. So I think time scales is what we need in a document, because, you know, we could be looking at this in 5 years' time, and actually we haven't done anything in terms of the traffic management in the part of the borough that I represent and know the issues there. So I think, you know, we're talking there, but I think I'd like some time scales in terms of the plans of the county council, because they're the highways authority. They're the ones who we have to hold to account for issues in our borough in terms of the roadways, etc. So I think, you know, we need more definite timelines off them, which we're not getting at the moment. I would love to think that people wouldn't do single person journeys, but that's never going to happen. So I think they're being a bit unrealistic. You know, promote behaviour change. When the buses in the borough are so expensive and it is cheaper to get into the car, I just don't see how the county are going to rectify that one in terms of working with us. In terms of you've got funding sources in here, and in terms of the policy, you say you're going to do a workshop with officers. I think that might be useful for members as well. We have got new members on here who don't know, and I'm grateful that you'd give the little bit in before, because obviously it does help us then realise what it means. There is an awful lot of spelling mistakes in this document that need looking at. Newtown Road suddenly gone to Newton Road and things. And the other is in terms of the funding sources. We are saying about within existing funding sources. I don't actually know what funding sources this borough has towards air quality management, so that would be useful for it to know, and what the county are putting in as well. Thank you, Chair.
Andrew, do you have anything to come back with?
Yeah, I'll perhaps take the most recent one. So, with regards to revoking AQA1, so the Leicester Road gyratory, all the data that we have and all the results that have come to that conclusion are all pre-pandemic. So we're assuming traffic levels at that point are sort of real, if you know, for want of a better word. So we haven't used the figures that we would have from, you know, the time of the pandemic to justify that. So we've had 5 years of comfortably below the objective in that location, and that's the reason for considering revocation or proposing revocation through the action plan. Timescales, yeah. I mean, I can. The trouble is, Whether Warwickshire completely know of all the timescales, I don't know, but I can ask. I think probably the best thing is to speak to Warwickshire and see whether we can iron out timescales, at least on some areas, and see what they're working to. Because I think for the things that they've got so some of their Transforming Nuneaton project, for example, I know they've secured funding and that's in place. So I presume there are timescales for that. So perhaps we can I can speak to them and we can try and clarify that. Just to check through the notes I made during that. Yeah, workshop. So the workshop that was proposed in the report is, it was quite specific to the supplementary planning document, and it was a workshop to do with our planning team. But I don't see a problem with doing that for members at all. I'm sure that's fine to create awareness and understanding of how that process works, as once developments come to us and how that's looked at from an air quality point of view. Yeah. So. Were there any other points from yourself, Councillor Shepherd, that you'd want me to come back on before I move to some of the others? Oh, sorry.
Never used to do that. Used to have two on at a time. In terms you said about the workshops and times and timescales, so I think that would be useful to know. Yeah, because I don't know. I can't say I've seen much on air quality issues on planning, and I've sat on planning a long time. I can't say I've ever seen a comment from maybe yourself or the team to say we've got issues around air quality in this area. So it's just something maybe the team could look at it, maybe when we've got the big planning applications, etc.
A few points from Councillor Hondarka, wasn't there? Yeah, I mean, I think you'd mentioned Bedworth and other areas of Nuneaton not mentioned on there. I mean, the tube coverage that we have is fairly widespread on across the borough. Obviously, the duty on us is to look at where we exceed the air quality objective, which is where we've declared the air quality management areas. So, yeah, I mean, any levels of pollution could affect people, but the government have set out the air quality objective that the local authority should achieve as being the 40 micrograms per metre. So that's where we target our efforts as prescribed by the legislation, and that's the basis of the action plan. With regards to particulates, you mentioned the World Health Organization levels and the government levels. The requirement on particulates, PM2.5, sits with the government to deal with that. That's not a requirement of local authorities to monitor that or implement measures to do it. And the other thing to say is it's a background ambient level rather than a roadside level. So DEFRA, on behalf of the government, essentially have to deal with that. We can support that by putting measures as we have, like we talked about, say, domestic fuel burning and that sort of thing. But the legal duty on us is the stuff that's set out in the local air quality management legislation, which covers NOx and the elements that we mentioned here. So it is with DEFRA and the government to deal with PM2.5. Obviously, we want to support it because it does have, there are big health implications with PM2.5, but there isn't a duty on us to monitor it. The thing to say, it's monitored at automatic locations by DEFRA. I think they've got some in Coventry. But to robustly monitor it, and I know you mentioned the monitor you've got there, but to robustly monitor it, as far as I'm aware, is extremely expensive in a way, you know, that's sufficiently robust that you could use it to make legal decisions on in terms of air quality.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Pandarka.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I was looking on the chart, on Coventry Road, 36 and 50, and then maximum is quite a high, 51.79 and 47.54. And this is during the pandemic time, you know, there may be less traffic on the Coventry Road and Baton Road area. So do we have any plan how we can reduce the nitrogen dioxide in this area because the Bayton Road is quite a big industry estate and Coventry Road is busy road. And there's a quite high nitrogen dioxide in this area. So we just want to find out, do we have any plan to reduce this? Thank you.
These were the Coventry Road, Bedworth locations, were they? I mean, the first thing to say is that none of them exceed the objective. The second thing is that this is 2019 data, so it's all pre-pandemic. So we assume traffic levels are at their natural state at that point. They've not been impacted by COVID-19 because that was obviously 2020. This is all from 2019, so these are probably more reliable data to go from. In terms of tackling it, I mean, we do want to improve air quality borough-wide, and we hope that the measures that we put in place to improve air quality, in Midland Road, which obviously we've got a particular focus on, but a lot of those measures will have wider benefits. So, for example, the supplementary planning document, which sets out how planning developments are to be assessed in terms of air quality, applies borough-wide. That's not specific to Midland Road and surrounds, that applies everywhere. So we're putting in place measures through that process. Or the other, so for example, controlling domestic emissions, we'd be looking at doing that across the borough. And also alternatively fueled vehicles has an impact because they, most vehicles don't stay in one very localized place. They're going to travel, further and wider. So there's a lot of knock-on effect from measures that have been put in place with a view to the air quality management areas that we hope will have effects across the borough and wider than that.
Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, and sorry if this has already been asked. I'm got a disability with hearing, and unfortunately I'm struggling tonight because it's the first time I've been, so I might have missed something that you've already said, so I do apologise if I'm re-asking. What I need to understand is when you're trying to change something, you need to prove a point to people. So why haven't we proved a point in 2020 when we have the pandemic, when people aren't using the roads, to actually say to the people, look, by not using your vehicles and doing this, this is what we've got. You're saving the pollution. So we haven't got those figures. Are those figures not going to be available, or are they?
Yeah, we will have those figures. Every year we have to do an annual status report. So the 2021 is currently being worked. No, sorry, the 2020 data it comes under the 2021 annual status report. So that's being worked on at the moment, and the data's to and fro with our consultants producing that. So yes, in answer to your question, yeah, the data will be available and it'll be published on the website. Yeah.
Councillor Sargent, would you like to come back?
Sorry, yeah. So I think it'd be a great way, if we can see the figures, and it'd be a great idea then to prove the point. Do you know what I mean? To prove the point, to say this, when you weren't using your cars, when you weren't in this area, and then to see if there's other things other than cars that is actually causing this. Because that would be interesting if the cars aren't in the area. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to reassure everybody that I do have the remnants of a cough, that I have had a few negative COVID tests, so just wanted to get that out there. So questions to Andrew, please. Some of this, I think you'll agree, looks quite idealistic, promotion of behaviour change. I've got a document here about the actual impact of a northern relief road actually making improvements to the environment. So I would like your comments on whether there is any possibility of that being taken up rather than kind of airy-fairy things like, oh, let's get people on their bikes. When Councillor Condacore has explained how unsafe, how dangerous it is to travel on. I don't know if you travel on a bike through Nuneaton. It's dangerous. Driving in today, and I would cycle. I love cycling, but it's not safe. Looking at, there's a couple of page numbers on here. So page 22 over 48, it's the AQAP measures. It talks about a very nice cycle scheme along the Longshoot, high quality, safe, segregated cycle track. I'm wondering when that will actually materialise. We've been talking about that for a long time. It's extremely unsafe to cycle along the Longshoot due to the speeding, aggressive traffic. We were told about a scheme in Coventry at one of these OSPs a few years ago where the police were cycling along and stopping cars who were coming too close to cyclists. Brilliant scheme. That would be a good measure to encourage people to actually get out of their cars and get on their bikes as one potential solution. We saw, as Councillor Sargent says, millions of cyclists over lockdown when it was actually safe to get on your bike. Also wondering about the huge own goals of reducing or taking away parking charges. I think it was, as the councillor said, just encouraging everybody to get in their car and come into the town centre and park for free. And will have the knock-on effect of having people driving round and round in endless queues, unable to get into a car park. And the own goal of us being here tonight. The huge advantage to the environment of being able to have remote meetings instead of the government-owned goal of forcing everybody to get in their cars because there's no other way safely to get to the town hall to come and sit in meetings, albeit that several councillors haven't turned up this evening. And also just wanted an update also on the Bermuda Relief Road, what's happening there. I haven't heard anything about that recently. Thank you.
I'm not aware of an update on the Bermuda Relief Road. It's not something that we're directly involved with. We were involved at the planning stage when the planning applications came in. I understood it was sort of work was meant to be starting imminently, really, but I don't really know, in truth. I suppose all I can say on the cycling is I can take your point on it, really. I mean, I'm not sure that there is any real comeback because it's to your view on it. So, point noted, I suppose. I'm not sure necessarily it's for me to answer the point on free parking because obviously, to a degree, members have got to evaluate all the social and economic sort of issues that arise with this sort of thing. So I'm not quite sure I'm the best place to answer that, really.
Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Elliott.
Sorry, you missed off the Longshoot cycle way. Just wondered, page 22 or 48. If we could have an update on that. It's here in the paperwork. Is it still just an ideal goal or is something happening there? It's a most bizarre cycle route. And there's bits on the pavement. You can cycle a few yards and then you have to get off. It's perplexing. At least there is the attempt of a cycle route. There isn't in most of Nuneaton. I've gone to these cycle panels, several of them. Nothing is actually materialising. The ideal is the promotion of behaviour change. That's what you said to us. So I just wondered what is actually happening to promote behaviour change, and if nothing is happening, then why aren't we looking at this Northern Relief Road or cycle routes?
When we had the initial group meetings, we had the guy from Warwickshire in relation to the cycle schemes, and he talked a lot with the consultants about it. Reading that, I would take that to mean that they, because as you said, it's not, at the moment, it's not a complete cycleway, that is something that they've been allocated funding for and have yet to implement. But I'll come back and confirm on that.
Does anybody else have any questions? In that case, I just have a couple I'd like to ask. Can you just confirm something in the report from Annual Status Report 2020? There's a line in here, you were talking about the sensors and the monitoring on the Leicester Road gyratory. There's a line at the end here which says, upon review of the 2019 ASR, there has been substantial growth in house building to the north side of Nuneaton. And it says in the report that the monitoring will stay in place for a further year. Was that 19 to 20, or is that?
So that would be from within the, well, to answer the question, the monitoring will stay in place indefinitely, in truth, because even if we revoke the air quality management area, we'd still monitor there, because it's obviously very busy, as we all know. So, because we monitor in lots of locations that aren't air quality management areas, so rather than pin it to a particular year, it's easier to say that in reality we will continue to monitor there anyway, and then we'd be aware if problems arose.
So if an issue arises, then you're in a position to look at it and be able to do something about it.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question as well, being new to this? The monitoring systems. Can you just explain a little bit more about the monitoring systems? Because when I was looking at one of the reports, I was just looking at NB30, NB29 and NB51. I believe NB29 and NB51, which are on Midland Road and Abbey Green School. Is there any difference in the type of monitoring, and how is the monitoring set up there? Because I believe that they're approximately opposite each other.
So just remind me of the numbers again.
NB29, which is number 16 Midland Road,
Yeah.
and you have NB51, which is Abbey Green School.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the differences in the numbers.
Yeah, because the Abbey Green School monitor, which I think from one of the maps in the reports, they're virtually opposite each other.
That's right.
And obviously by the traffic lights.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if there was a reason for the discrepancy in the figures.
Yeah.
Because they're a bit of a difference.
There is a reason. It's the same monitoring. So we use the nitrogen dioxide tubes affixed in both of those locations. But what typically you find with air quality is that you can have, as you say, pretty much the same location just on the other side of the road. And this is one of the reasons why the big cities really struggle and have a much more of an air quality problem than, say, smaller towns, is that you get the canyon effect. So where you've got big buildings, there's not much dispersion for pollutants to escape. So in that location, on the one side of the road, you've got a row of terrace houses with no real way of it getting away. On the other side, it's much more open because you've got the school playing field, and the difference you see there, at least a good proportion of the difference, is likely to be to do with the canyon effect. And it's a widely acknowledged, issue in air quality, and it is always those locations. And effectively, the bigger places, London, Birmingham, Sheffield and Leeds, for example, that's why they're, as well as being really busy, that's why they really struggle on air quality.
And just one further point on that. Obviously, on Midland Road, you have commercial premises within a vicinity of, I think it's NB30. I think there's one particular commercial premises probably within less than half a mile. What sort of effect would those premises have on air monitoring, and what can we do with commercial premises to make sure that they're helping us to bring down the air quality?
Well, it largely depends on the nature of the premises and the business that they undertake. It's more difficult if they're already in existence. You know, as long as they're acting within the law, then you are relying on their goodwill to take any measures. If the business is not in place, as in it's a planning development, then the planning system would kick in if it triggered, you know, concerns around air quality. But in relation to businesses that are already there, if they're legally compliant, it is based on their sort of goodwill to take steps, to be encouraged to take steps, I suppose. Are there particular businesses, because I'm thinking there's probably one or two there, and also businesses opposite. Are there particular sites that you were thinking of with that?
I just know that you've got there's a waste transfer station there, which will obviously have heavy commercial traffic in and out of it. And I just wondered what sort of effect that would have on the air monitoring, and whether or not, from where it is to where the receptor is, whether it would be picked up there and it would be noted there.
Unquestionably, the vehicle movements will have an impact on the levels of nitrogen dioxide in that location, just because they're moving sort of past that tube. So inevitably, we haven't quantified it, and I think it'd be hard to quantify very specifically, but unquestionably it will have some impact. Probably quite small given the overall volume of traffic that use the road as a proportion of the amount that use that site, but it's still an impact.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So the panel is being asked to consider the items that are set out on page 16 of the agenda, which are, first and foremost, does the panel support the review of the Air Quality Action Plan as a means to implement air quality improvements? And if that answer is in the affirmative, does the panel support the Air Quality Action Plan in the form shown in Appendix A? And if the preference is for a modified form of Air Quality Action Plan, the panel is asked to consider what modifications it would like to put forward for consideration. So we've had some suggestions in terms of the specificity in the plan, whether you want us to look at the actions and look at the timeframes for delivery of those actions. That's obviously one that we can take away, but I suspect, Chair, it might be something that you may want to look at in a broader context through asking the County Council Highways people to come and present on proposals in terms of delivery. That would also pick up the issue of the cycleway delivery at the same time. So that's certainly something that you could do and consider when you want when we bring the work programme to you, which will be at your next meeting. In addition, Chair, obviously there are some issues in terms of the Leicester Road gyratory and the rationale for its removal. I don't know, Chair, whether there is anything that the panel particularly want to hear further from officers on. Clearly, as I think Andy said in his introduction, that is a recommendation that's coming from DEFRA itself. So, I believe we've, from memory, I think we received that recommendation in 2018. It might have been 2017. So I think we probably did do the 12-month monitoring in normal time, if you like, pre-pandemic, but we can check that for you and confirm that. But beyond that, Chair, I don't know whether there's anything specific that the panel want to move by way of a recommendation that we can take forward. It will actually be in discussion with Councillor Guttridge's portfolio holder in any event, and he is here, so he'll get to hear it firsthand as well.
Councillor Shepherd.
Chair, if it's helpful, I'll move something and see if it gets a seconder and think the committee agree, that we do not at this time move the Leicester Road out of the air quality management areas. I think that would be the wrong move at this present time. That we also invite, as Philip has suggested, the county to discuss what they're doing in terms of timelines, etc. to it. So I'm happy to move that.
Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Does anybody have anything else they wish to add?
So, Chair, what you have now, you have a motion before you not to remove the Leicester Road gyratory and to ask the County Council Highways officers to come and present to this panel on delivery of the highway improvements as a result of transforming Nuneaton, the timeframes for that. We can pick up the Bermuda Bridge as part of that as well, Chair, because of course they're dealing with that. And then secondly, the cycleway provision as well and delivery of that. So that's the recommendation that's before the panel. So you can now take a vote on that, Chair.
Can I ask all those in favour? Yep. All those against? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. We'll bring that forward onto the work plan.
Yes, Chair. The forward plan is presented to the panel. We do bring this to the panel, Chair, for first of all information, but also the forward plan is an indication of the executive decisions that the Cabinet are planning to take. The forward plan has a time horizon normally of about 4 months ahead. So it's here in case any members of the panel feel that there's anything on the forward plan that you would want to pre-scrutinise before the decision is made by Cabinet. You can do that. You can call that in, ask for a report. So it's your opportunity really to consider if there's anything there you think actually you'd like to have a look at before it gets to Cabinet, just to understand and see whether there's anything that you would want to recommend to Cabinet when it finally gets its report. So that's why it's here, Chair.
Does anybody have any items on the forward plan that they would like to bring up? Obviously, within the next couple of weeks, we'll be working on the work plan as well. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make the same comment I made at the last scrutiny meeting in terms of it would be helpful to have which scrutiny these belong to at the side of it. Because at the moment, with the changes to the scrutiny panel, it makes it a bit difficult to decide which one it actually goes to. But on saying that, I really would like the domestic abuse bill to come to this panel and the changes for vacant plots at mobile homes as well.
Does anybody have anything else to add?
Okay, Chair. Just looking at the programme, obviously those matters are identified to go to Cabinet in July. So it may well be that if they do come forward, it may well be after the decision's actually been taken. Whether there's any point in that is another matter, but it is something that we can ask Dawn Dawson just to confirm what the timeframes are in case there's any slippage. If there is, then obviously it would be sensible then to bring it here, if that's the desire of the panel. Decision's actually been taken.
We can wait for
whether there's any point in that is another matter, but it is something that we can ask Dawn Dawson just to confirm what the timeframes are in case there's any slippage. In terms of the if there is, then obviously it would the items to the individual portfolio panels. Yes, that will be ready for the next meeting. That's the purpose of the meeting that we had last week with all the chairs to sort that out. So we have updated the next version of the forward plan. Will have that information on it.
Move forward to any other business. Does anybody have anything they wish to raise? In that case then, we will bring the meeting to a close. If everybody could sit still until notified to leave the room, your appreciation of that would be very thankful.